You're listening to the Pursuing Alpha podcast, hosted by Charles Brandon Snyder.
Hey, so Randy, I really appreciate you joining us today. And I know we've talked a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, and we just caught each other on the right time on the phone earlier this week. And I said, hey, why don't you just jump into a podcast with us? So, hey, take 5 seconds here, kind of introduce yourselves, and I really appreciate you jumping on.
Oh, this is fun. I enjoy this sort of thing. I'm Randy Christian, and I've lived in Lubbock, Texas since since '77. Moved here from traveling around. How I got to Lubbock was opening up restaurants, and one of them was the Steak and Ale restaurant on 50th. A lot of people might remember. But I was fortunate enough to get off of that train and get back and started doing what I went to school for. I went to Amarillo College for 2 years, was going to go to Tech. They wouldn't transfer some credits. So I wound up going to North Texas and Denton that had a really good radio, TV, film program, and which also opened the door for me to have several good internships with Dallas ad agencies like Tracy Locke. And actually I worked for them for a little while as a copywriter.
So you ended up owning and running RCMP. That's how I know you. And so we've known each other for a few years, could you say? Yeah. So,
yeah, a few.
Just a few.
Since you were in diapers, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and now I'm in diapers, so yeah, that's how it works. Yeah.
And so it's funny. So what is it? So your second uncle?
We'd be second cousins.
Second cousins. I can't remember. They always get when they get to the start.
Because your dad and I were first cousins.
Okay, all right. So that's how it works. Second cousins.
And then your grandparents, mom and dad.
Yeah,
they're brothers and sisters.
And so your kids and me grew up together at Lubbock Christian.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially Peter primarily, but Philip was a little bit behind, not very far behind you guys.
So me and Philip, I think I was a senior when he was a freshman. We played baseball together, and
that was a fun time.
It was a fun time.
I
enjoyed
really
life.
Such a growing experience for everybody. I think resurrecting that program basically.
It did, and I got to give credit to Phil Bryant and Brian Pintinello, just huge mentors of me when I was young and dumb and in high school, and just just great human beings.
And great baseball players.
Yeah, I mean Phil played with Nolan Ryan at the Rangers. Yeah. And Pitt played AAA ball and went all the way through it. They both won 83 Lubbock Christian World Series together. Yeah. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so it came back, and I just happened to catch them my senior year. And their first year, I wish I would have had all 4 years with them, but they were amazing. There's a reason I played a little bit of college ball was those two men, but it's awesome. And Philip played there with you, and then you're running RCMP at that point in time, a pretty large ad agency here in West Texas.
It was, I would be okay with saying it was probably the largest agency in Lubbock because, and actually I started that business with a couple of high school buddies that I went to Tascosa and Amarillo, and they called me up one day and said, hey, how would you like to, and I'd already been in the agency, worked for an agency, and they said, how'd you like to go in business? And we want to open up a Lubbock office. They were very, very, very successful in Amarillo already. One of the largest clients that they had was Amarillo National Bank. And everybody knows that story a little bit about who the ownership is.
Yeah, the Ware family.
Well, it's still probably one of the largest family-owned banks in the country.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let's roll the dice and let's make this happen. So at that time, you probably the Crosnose at CompuShare. Crosnose has been very involved at Lubbock Christian for a long time. But anyway, at that point, I was the marketing director for a software company.
Okay. So
that was an interim deal I had going, and what I'm getting at is I opened up. At that time it was Holland Merriman and Christian before the RCMP. I opened it up in one of the little suites at the Pyramid building, and it was me and probably one of the first fax machines in Lubbock, Texas. I'm not kidding you. I'm really in that. So I would get artwork, and I was using the staff in Amarillo until I got a couple of clients and then started hiring people. And at the end of the day, when I did close the agency in 2007, we had the offices in Austin, Houston, Oklahoma City, a small media shop in Dallas, and then, of course, Amarillo and Lubbock. And we were doing, roughly $35 million a year and had incredible clients. out here for sure, and then found out that they were monkeying with the books a little bit. So I decided I wanted to dissolve that relationship, and that's when I became RC&P.
Yeah, you bought it back from him. Sound like so, and this is interesting for me because I always try to tie it into finance a little bit, but we're going to go in a lot of different directions because you've had a couple of stints in a lot of different areas. I mean, you did a lot of political advertising,
right.
And then you ended up being a council member for quite a few years here in West Texas.
4 years.
Yeah, and so
one of the greatest experiences I've ever had.
I know, and we were talking about this before we jumped on. I think we'll probably loop some of that back into it. So I always say I'm very political, but yet very anti-political. So I keep that kind of quiet, but I kind of let it out whenever I'm around of people where I'm not going to offend on my own perspective. But it's a unique time that we're in, but it's also a unique to actually see where our Constitution's going in a lot of different directions. So we'll dive into that one in a second, right? But really getting back to RC&P and what you did there and how you bought back that company and financing. I always look at it like we wrote a book and we're doing our first publication that's coming out literally. It's supposed to come out this week. It's supposed to come out today. Our first magazine, our first edition. I'm really proud of this thing. And when we dove into doing this, we heard about it and we were like, hey, we're doing the podcast. Let's go ahead and put a magazine together. And I was like, hey, that sounds really interesting. And I'm big about trying to give back as much information I had. So when I started researching for the magazine, I found out that 83% of all businesses, and this is done by the SBA, and it was a bank, it was like Goldman or one of the major banks did a partnership with the SBA. They figured out that small businesses go under 83% of the time because they don't understand cash flow and they don't understand how cash flow works inside their business until it's too late, right? And so this is one of the things that we were talking about, how we control and how we operate Alpha Capital. My financial firm is trying to help educate cash flow into business owners. And our primary bent is try to make a better life for business owners because I think they're the backbone to what we have in our society today. Is without the small business owner, I think you're done, and you don't want to go. I'm starting to lean more and more, even though I'm working the public markets and in the the stock market and all that other stuff. I think they're all great, but I would rather work with a small business owner any day of the week. That's has his own skin in the game. Understands.
Well, I think a lot of businesses don't. This cash flow is important too, but also a lot of small businesses and people that kind of have starry-eyed. They don't think as much about. You got to have some reserves too. You got to have some rainy day fund, and you better have you better think it through how much you need to have on that, even as a small business, because something can go like what's happening right now.
Right.
If you were a small business owner and you were in San Francisco and your customers couldn't get to you because there's a bunch of people sleeping out in front of your, there's just so many things that can go south in a hurry for a small business person that you cannot control. I mean, we were always accused by the banker that we had too much cash reserves, and we said, well, maybe we do or we don't. Let's talk about it. But here's where our par level is, so to speak, that we want to maintain, and we got it. We need to talk about it every time we have a board meeting or an owners meeting. That how's cash, but let's make sure we have that fund there too, for whatever reason.
And this is where I was going with it. So what we've done is we've actually put that in. So what's neat? So there's so many smart people in the world, and they come up with all these neat things that I've been fortunate where I've hired or they're a part of our team in one deals. And so I got to tell you, I got a 25, 26-year-old CFA that it's so brilliant inside of there. But I've also got some really good mentors. That's really as I've grown in the last 15 years of my business, is really understand how cash flow works. And when I say cash flow, you got to understand burn rate. And it goes to your point. You got to understand how much capital you're going to burn if you turn the spigot off, and how long can your company last. And so if you had no clients, no income, right? How much capital? What's that nut every month that you got to cover?
Exactly. Good old nut.
Yeah, right. And so knowing that, then there's a cost to capital. And I think this is another thing that the cost of capital today is people are figuring that out the hard way. Is a cost of capital used to be really, really cheap. Now it's really expensive with the high inflation and high interest rates that we're experiencing right now. So there's so many things that I think small business owners, they're really, really good at analyzing their business and going and finding business and becoming an expert in what they do, building that widget, or providing that service, whatever it is. But I've found that the mass majority of them don't understand the finances behind it. And so one of the big...
That's not their skill set.
It's not. And so they either hire it done or they become an expert and then their business side. And so that's where I think there's a gap in what we do. So, our financial bend is always saying that we're a holistic financial planning firm that actually integrates in with business owners. Wes said it. He was on our podcast last week, and if you hadn't watched that, Randy, you need to watch.
Oh, well, yeah, Wes. I would love to.
Wes is insane, but he talks that he's now turned in, instead of a holistic financial planner, his term now is an integrated financial planner.
That works.
Yeah, so he's more integrated into your business to actually help you understand how business operates and how he does it is completely different than me. I want to understand how your business operates so I can help you understand how to leak out assets outside of your business. So if you do have an unforeseen event, what does most business owners tie all their assets into? It's 90% into their business.
Yep.
Right. And so their business owns their vehicles. Their business has all their capital in it. The business has all the real estate in it besides their primary residence. And so it's all these things get tied into it. And I'm like, hey, hold on 1 second. If you get a hiccup in that business, we got a lot of risk in there. We got a concentrated risk. So that's kind of where we're going. But tie it back into.
But that I was going to say that makes the agency business is a very high risk business.
It is, because what's the first thing that gets cut?
Well, but the point of it is, and we would even do some modeling. Okay, here we got. I'm just going to say, here we got 50 clients. Mm-hmm. What happened if tomorrow half of them left?
Right.
What action are you going to have to take to keep your doors open, if nothing else? Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to make some really tough decisions. But what happened if you have a 50% growth as well? So in the agent, it is very common for somebody a real big client to come in and say, hey, we decided to go use X instead of y'all for this thing, and it could possibly be as much as 30% of your overall business.
Right.
That one client, especially when we got to the point where we were having we had a couple $1 million clients, and we have some smaller ones, local ones too. But yeah, but boy, if you lost $1 million client, and how do you offset that, and what percentage of that is your total sales, if you will, for the entire agency? And if you lost that, what do you do? You better take some action pretty quick.
And you do. And I was talking to an automotive group, and they're in a transition right now, and I got to be delicate on how I can say this.
Sure.
And so they're in the transition and going, hey, we used to run a business this way. And the new buck that came in, the new guy, great guy, and now they're looking at it, and he runs it completely different, and there's turmoil there. And I don't think either one of them's right or wrong. I just think that's, hey, you did it this way for a long time. This is a new deal. But the common denominator that I'm trying to get to is you really got to look at that free cash flow. And so really have to look at that burn rate, and they're fixing to find out, because we talked about that before we started, is really going where the state of the economy that we're in today is really, really troublesome and troubling in so many aspects of it. And so if you're not careful here, you can unwind a decade's worth of progress and end up going out of business because you're not modeling it. And it's a hard thing to do. I mean, even one of our companies today, we had a hardship in there. And I looked at it going, hey, because we have so many things in place, so many mechanisms to be able to weather things like this, was it uncomfortable? Yeah, it was uncomfortable, right? But did it hurt us? No, I'll recover from it in less than a week inside of it. It's not going to hurt us a whole lot, but I see what's coming down there, and I'm going, guys, y'all are living a really margin-less life, where they're living to 100% of their capacity. They're working 100% of their capacity, and they're spending to 100% of their capacity. And when all three of those things happen, you're 1 week, 1 month, or 1 year away from unwinding a lot of progress. And so, and you can't fix that. And so you really have to scale. And this is where, we talk about our application, or our magazine, and all these things, that the small business owner is the last one to actually start laying off and moving people around. They are the last one because they have such deep relationships to their employees and to their clients and things like that. They don't want to shift that. They don't want to disrupt that. But if you go into look at publicly traded companies, they're the first.
Oh, of course they are.
Yeah, you're already seeing Microsoft and NVIDIA and some of these.
Well, they were probably heavy. They were too heavy to begin with. A lot of them are.
But didn't they scale and fatten up during COVID? I mean, they hired crazy when everybody shut down, right? And everybody's saying, no, they're laying off, they're laying off, they're laying off. Well, they're actually just reducing back down to post-COVID levels. But that looks like a layoff, right? But small businesses don't do that. Mm-hmm. They don't scale and then contract that scale and then scale again. And so I see so many of these guys and that's where I'm saying free cash flow. You got to really watch that thing. It's okay, like you said, a perfect 50% reduction or even a 20 or 30% reduction in business. What happens if you grow 20 or 30%? You probably have to add people. What happens if that goes backwards, right? How do you do that to stay alive? And I've never been in a situation where I've had to lay off people. I've been that fortunate where we've had capital where we can weather, a bad year inside of there. We've never had a bad year either too. So it's as far as losing clients or things like that. But I would tell you, if there's mechanisms in place to small business owners, I feel like that if they have that information, if they have that data that these publicly traded and corporate and large conglomerates have that says, hey, this is the trend of what the economics is doing in our society. Here's what's going to be the trend of your business, and you might fall off a cliff here. We better start preparing for this.
Well, at least need to start thinking about it. And that's one of the things that I think that is really important as far as being, try to develop a discipline in regards to finances, because I told you that when I had the business, we paid for our accountant for her to be a CPA.
Yeah,
and
smart move.
It's invaluable. Yep. So every week we would go over the numbers in detail. And I am not that. I'm far away from being a CPA. I'm that creative guy that comes up with the idea and then put together the team to make it happen. But I knew that. So that's the other thing is quit fooling yourself sometimes.
Good point.
In thinking that, okay, I'm the president of this company and I should know this and this and this. And I always remember when I told you about when I worked for Steak and Ale, Norman Brinker was the guy that started it. And that's Chili's and that's On the Border and all these other stuff. And he was still head of the company.
Yeah, Brinker's publicly traded.
Yeah, exact. Brinker International.
Mm-hmm.
But he was still head of the company at the time. Old New Mexico kid. He was an Olympic equestrian. His passion was polo. But he would address the management training. There was about 20 or 20 every training session. That's how many they implemented. But he said two things that I'll never forget. And this is not original, I know. But he said when somebody asked me what I can attribute my success to, and he says hiring people smarter than I am.
That's literally the trend at the firm here today. Yeah. If you don't hire people smarter than you,
you're pretty dumb.
You're pretty dumb.
And the other thing he said, he was had about a 15, 20-minute commute from his house to the corporate headquarters. He said every morning. He said, I never turn on the radio.
His time to think?
Never turn on the radio. He said, I continually go over and over the primary things that I want to accomplish that day.
Hey, let's talk about that for a second. So I'm a big advocate of this, and my biggest fault is and my team can attest to this. My brain, when I get up and get going, it's on warp drive. It's in warp drive. Yeah. And so I've had to teach myself we have cards on my desk, and Paige does a really good job at doing this, is I have to try to tackle 3 things that are the most important things in my day.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah, and then you tackle everything else you can get to. So what did you do, and to the point, right? So you go over what your day is. You try to plan everything out, and you try to plan what you're going to try to accomplish and get everything moving forward, because you can't do it. You can't do it all, right? That's the hardest part. And you have to hire really good people. And I would say, don't hire the smartest person. It's hurt me hiring the smartest person. I would say hire the most competent person over the most smartest person. The problem with hiring smart people that are only smart, or that they think they're smart, is right. They're typically not humble. And so you can't give them things that are below their perception of task, of duties, of what responsibility. And everybody has the 20% rule where it's 20% of your job sucks, right? It's 80, if you're living a great life and a rich life, if you're doing 50% of your job is in what you love to do, right? 30% of your job is what you're capable of doing and you get enjoyment out of it, but it's not your passion. And the other 20% is like, hey, I got to answer emails, pick up the phone, right? Go to put this report together, whatever it is.
I got to see somebody that I really don't want to see.
It might be that. You might be an introvert and you might like to stay in your
I
dungeon.
mean, there's going to be some problem. That's going to be a problem solving that you're going to have to look somebody right in the eyeballs, and it may either be an employer or it could and
a client.
I can think of clients and going, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, in my career, I can think of decoupling from maybe a half a dozen clients. I made that choice.
Right. You decided it's just not a good fit.
No, not a good fit. Even when we were in the I had, I can think of at least two that called us up because we had that kind of a really good reputation. And I went in and basically I interviewed them, and I don't really think they realized I was doing that. Mm-hmm. But then I came back and I said, we've got, and I always made up stuff anyway. If we've got one little client over here that we feel like maybe a conflict, we appreciate the opportunity, but adios.
Yeah, so you try to make it as subtle as you possibly can where it wasn't an ego slap. You know what I'm saying? Where It's like you didn't turn them down. Unfortunately, in our job, we're having to do that on a monthly basis. And we've gotten to the stance where the firm can only take on so many clients. Right? And so and we feel like we're extremely good, as humble as we can, extremely good at doing some things. And right now the market's really, really tough. So I'm not saying we're infallible. Like we don't make mistakes inside here, but the way that we operate as a financial planning firm is just we actually have a whole meeting right at the first is trying to understand this client and understand the season of life they're in, what they're trying to accomplish, and seeing if our firm actually aligns with what they're trying to accomplish.
Right.
And sometimes we're just not a good fit.
No, it's not a good fit. And you have somebody sometimes that, I'm sorry I interrupt, but one of the biggest detriment into a ad agency client relationship is a bad marketing director on the client side.
Yeah, I could see that. Like Ryan experienced that. I mean, he's our creative director, and he runs our production inside this podcast, and he experienced that just the last couple of weeks. He had a great client, they did great creative, and it stepped on the ego of
Absolutely.
The creative director, and then they decided to part ways, and they came back to us and didn't want to do creative, but they wanted to do media buying with them, and then all of a sudden 2 weeks later we started looking at their creative going, oh, come on. This was like,
this ain't going to work.
Well, it's just that it wasn't at the same level as what a true agency's creative was. And I think everybody kind of had that feeling that, it was a stepped on ego. They went from okay to kind of poor to pretty dang good. And they were getting traction off of it, back down to, this isn't great.
Been there.
Yep. And so,
Been there.
And then we had the local representation, call us up on the phone or call Ryan up on the phone and the staff, and it was like, this is horrible, but my hands are tied. Like, this is coming from corporate out of Houston, wasn't it? Or
Timbuktu.
And they were like, this is something, and we're complaining about it, but our hands are tied, and the political side of it hit in, and so it just stepped on somebody's ego. So I agree with you. I think that's a really tough. Ego is a hard thing to overcome.
Yeah, don't blame me on poor results when you don't let us do our job.
Yeah.
And I've been through that before, and sometimes it gets it back because it's not working. It's not driving people through the door. And the other thing that we did with the agency is we were always to the saying we can only get them through your front door.
They had experience of this a little while ago.
Yeah, because
17 leads came in and they only had one sale, and I was like, well, what's that? And sometimes it's both, though, right? So are you getting the right leads? Are you getting the right people that are coming through the door, and you're not being able to close because there's a broken process in what you're providing as a service, right? Or is it that, hey, they're driving the leads, but they're actually not the correct leads that actually
That's always a
aligns with their
possibility.
business. And so you always have to self-examine on that. And I think the team does a really good job on there to make sure that the quality of the lead is the correct lead. And I'm big on that.
It is both too, but what we did is we would do secret shoppers. And we'd let the client know what's going on and what was happening. We would get people going to the door, but nobody would service them. So what we did, we got into the customer service training program. I said, if we're going to at least you expect us to live and die by our swords, let us do some internal training so when the customer does go through that door by way of our creative and our campaign, that hopefully you're going to turn that into a sale. But right now, your training for customer service coming into whatever business it is horrible.
Yeah. I think as a society right now, it's bad. We were sitting down for lunch today, and I sat down and I was just blown away on the service. It was just, it's getting hard to get that college kid or that retail person in there to do good service. The politeness, and this is where, I mean, Wes was talking about this. Chick-fil-A nailed that.
Yeah. But they probably got a great training program.
Have you, I mean, you go to a Chick-fil-A and you go to a Walmart, McDonald's, which one you want to go to?
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
the way they talk
the
to
food,
you,
the food is
the food is, but even the experience. I like going to Chick-fil-A because you drive up to Chick-fil-A and it's like, how can I serve you today? I'm really happy that you come here. What's your name? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, they just make it a personal experience that you go through that invites you back. And when you go through a drive-through at one of these other places, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want? What can I get you?
Oh, you don't really want to get that. That's horrible.
Well, it's just so short-sighted in the way that they communicate, and it's just like you're bugging them. You know what I'm saying?
Well, but we made it as simple as possible because we did a lot of literally customer service training program in the healthcare industry, and all we did is script them. I said, okay, this is what you want. This is the response you should always have, regardless. And it took a while, and we had a great partner that did some of our training. But we turned a hospital around in Sherman because we were giving them help. We were training them. They never thought about the impact, and that goes back to branding. And branding is a big part of was my career. I love to do branding and branding sessions and find out the messaging that they need to be. And after you got those people trained, okay, if the patient comes up to the window of the doctor's office, this is what you show this every time. Every time. And that's what kind of you get at Chick-fil-A. Somebody's doing an order, you thank them, appreciate it, and it's not that hard. And once you give them the tools and they respond to the patient in that respect, and the patient smiles and says thank you back, you're starting building a culture.
Yeah, that culture's huge inside there.
Yeah, and you start building a culture, but it's kind of like somebody, the old saying, you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
Well, if somebody's in that hospital has not come and made a diligent effort to say life will be a lot better if you do X and you follow this procedure with a patient or customer, and they loved it. There was more smiles coming back from us after we had follow up on the training from the employees and said, "You're right. Our patients are much kinder and friendlier to us when we just do this little thing." That's just part of being a human being.
Right.
If somebody's nice to you, what's the possibility of you being nice to them?
Yeah, it is. And that's the hard part.
It's so simple.
It is simple. There's a study. Did you see that study? I can't remember. I'm going to botch it. Ron, see if you can find this study done. It was in a hospital that says if you're 6 feet away from somebody, smile at them.
Exactly.
If you're within 6 inches from somebody, shake their hand. That's the only change they did. And the hospital morale to their own staff, to
Everybody
their own
was
patients,
happier.
just doubled. I mean, it was insane. And so it's funny.
But it started with the CEO, too. He was walking the hallways, and we challenged him. I said, what we want you to do, and we're going to walk about 10, 12 feet from behind you on this deal. You're going to say hello to every person you meet down the hallway.
That small little change probably change. It makes people feel like they're valued.
Exactly.
That's the biggest change I think you have with it. And I've been fortunate in our business that my days when I'm in my zone and I'm in my happy place and I'm doing everything outside of running a business is sitting down with clients and having a conversation like this.
Yeah.
And getting to know them and you got to think about it. What we do is like the most intimate experience you can have with somebody. You know about their family, you know about their divorces, you know about all their picadillas, right? How they spend money, and all those things come to light inside of that meeting once trust is established. And sometimes that trust takes months, sometimes days, sometimes one meeting, sometimes years.
Yeah.
And it comes through on it, and you
just get the vibes too.
You get the vibes, right? And so it was kind of funny. We were in a meeting and you know, they just came out with a whole lot of information, and it was only about 30 minutes into it. And my paraplanner Gustavo's in there with us typically, and he's taking notes, and we're doing our thing. And I came out of that meeting going, hey, that was an incredible meeting. And I knew I built trust really, really quick with somebody as soon as they started telling me what they went through. And he goes, yeah, it shocked me. He goes, it just kind of got blurted out in the middle of the meeting, and the context of the conversation had nothing to do with it. So you knew it was on his mind. You knew it was on his chest. He was thinking about it. But I was like, yeah, he saw value from what we were providing him. We wanted to make sure that value was returned to him. And he was like, hey, I want to give you the full, here's me open. Yeah. How can you help me? This is what I have, and this is what's on my mind. And it was an experience. I get to experience that a lot. I bet it's different when you're running, hundreds to thousands of employees, because I have my handful, and it's tough. That you got to remember the little details of, hey, smile at people, shake their hands. If you can remember everybody's names. I'm horrible with remembering names.
I wouldn't expect that but just a nod and a smile and, hey, how's it going?
How's your day today, right?
Yeah,
good to see you. Yeah, things like that to everybody on your team is a big deal.
But I was very, very blessed to have a lot of great mentors very young. Because, I was for example, I was in my late 20s, early 30s when I was on the executive committee for United Way, Chamber of Commerce, and that. So I got a chance to meet a lot of people. But, iconic people in Lubbock, Texas, I got to know very well, like John Maloof. And John said something that I don't, it's probably not original, but he said one of the most sincere forms of flattery is asking somebody their opinion.
Oh, of course, 100%.
Yeah, I said, what do you think? What do you really think about this situation? And it is amazing, and especially other people that I consider leaders in town. You have and you're in a situation, and you ask them. What's your opinion? It's not just for younger people or the Chick-fil-A's of the world or that, but you ask somebody that's sitting in the corner of a board meeting, and a client and they're usually not say a whole lot, and you specifically ask that board member, well, Mr. Smith, what do you think about what's going on here? And they open up, and you've built a great advocate for what you're trying to sell and who you are.
Not only, yes, 100% there. And I think it's very important if somebody's equal or below the statute that you have. And I'm not talking about like arrogant side. I'm talking about like if you're a CEO and you're asking somebody that is a front desk person, right? So you're building a huge amount of rapport and flattery on there that a CEO would give you the time of day to ask you on there, because in large corporate America, that probably doesn't happen as much, right? And so, but I also think it's very, very important to look at the way that there's insight that people have.
Oh yeah,
that you don't know. You don't know.
I didn't know you were a nuclear physicist before you joined the board of
right,
something like.
Or you're processing this system inside of the company and it's flawed, and you think it's been flawed for 20 years, and if we fix these 1-2 things, we eliminate all these issues inside the company. That's the part where I'm always flabbergasted at it, and I get it wrong too. Like I run really hard, really fast. And so it's not, I think it's one of those things you have to be conscious of it and you have to recognize it. Because, there's times where I look at it and I give too much information.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I'm accused of that a lot of times.
Yeah. You give too much.
It's not what you say, it's what you don't say.
It's what you don't say, right? And so I've given staff and team, because I try to be too transparent and just say, here's what we're at, here's the firm, this is what we're doing. And sometimes that can come across as scaring people. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it can come across as, hey, we're moving in a direction that don't have a clear understanding of, and that scares them. And so you got to be careful on how you provide information.
Absolutely.
But you also have to be inquisitive on how you get information from people to make sure you have all the information. I think great CEOs, great leaders in every walks of life are really good at trying to capture all the data and the information they can to make a great decision and hearing everybody. And it's really hard to hear everybody because your day's packed.
It's just hard.
You don't have enough time. Yeah. And I think you have to carve some of that out sometimes to say it might feel like wasted time, but it's really not.
The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.
Hey, so we just took a quick break there, and I was fixing to ask you, what is the one thing from a marketing standpoint before we shift gears? Because before our time's up, I want to get into the political side. What is regular business owners take away about building a brand right? And then identifying how that's the first question. And then identifying how they can take that brand and expand it. And I think that's the hardest part. Everybody, when I talk to small business owners, they're right now they're saying, hey, I need new clients. I need to identify where I'm at. What I provide as a service and what my brand really is, that's a big thing. And I've experienced that with the agency. The second is how do I think it's turning into, you actually have an agency for hiring employees now. You have to have that brand awareness on saying it's a privilege to work at this company.
Absolutely.
Right. And so how do we translate that? Because most business owners I'm talking to today are saying, I could double in size if I could find the employees. And they just can't find the employees right now. And I always tell them that as soon as you think that, double your rates.
I'd agree.
Right. And so everybody's saying that the problem is I can't pay my employees. I got too much business. I want to grow. You don't need to grow. Inflation's hitting you right now. You don't even understand it. Double your rates. Get less clients, better clients, and then grow from there. Then scale from there.
Well,
so how do you build a brand?
A perfect example. Let me just digress just a little bit because I told you earlier, one of the transitions before I opened up an ad agency, I worked for a software. I was a marketing director for a software company here. Mm-hmm. And they said, man, we know we got a great product. We going out there and beating the sticks, and we're getting to do pitches and stuff like that. And so I did an analysis of them and their competition. You will not be surprised based upon what you just said. I said, you need to increase your prices.
Yeah. Because
you're screwing up your price value equation because you say you can have all these deliverables that may be even more than the competition that you're pitching against, but your price is 20% cheaper
than your competition.
Than the competition. So you're putting in the mind of that potential client, well, how can they deliver all of these and only charge this? Mm-hmm. So I convinced them, and they raised their prices, and they started winning the pitches that they had lost before because they increased the price of their product.
Yeah, so there's people, a good friend of mine told me this. He was in the furniture business. He said he walked in, and he said this, there's people that walk in that says if the price isn't expensive enough, they don't feel like there's value in the furniture.
Exactly.
And so he identified those people very fast. And you have to identify those people that they don't care about price. It's not their motivating decision making, right? It's not everybody's looking for the lowest denominator of price. They're looking for a value.
And so they're looking for what they want.
They want, yeah. And so if you provide them what they want and the value that they want, they'll pay a premium for it because they just want that service. They want that value inside of it.
But so back to your deal about
how do you create a brand?
Well,
what's the first thing you got to do?
I think that in my career, I was very, very good in helping companies build their brand, but it starts from the top. That people think they understand what their brand represents and stands for, but is that really what the public perceives it to be? So I've done 2-day branding sessions with companies and drilling down and finding out what they thought their brand means to both internally and externally, and what the reality of it. And sometimes you have to take the bricks down and start building it one brick at a time. But it's a process. There is no question. If you think that you can, and we have a certain coach in town that was really preaching brand for a lot until the season start, and you don't hear anything about that. You should never have to explain what your brand is if you do it right.
Sure.
In the great ones, I mean, I'm not a Nike person, but all you have to do is see the swish, and you know who it is, what they is, and what they're all in. And the brand should generate an instant feeling about that brand. Are they worthwhile? But it takes a lot of work from internally in understanding these parameters, and this is where we want to go with this. And then you start teaching your folks why, like you basically said. If it's true and they've done a good job, it is a privilege to work here. It is a privilege, because if you go out and wear a T-shirt for whatever, pick a brand.
Yeah, Under Armour, Nike.
Pick a brand. And it could be a logo, whatever it is.
Go look at Lululemon right now.
Exactly.
But I mean, the exorbitant fees that they're charging for some spandex is insane, right? But it's
probably
all around
made by child labor somewhere.
Yeah, right. It's crazy where value is, and my wife, like she likes, she doesn't, she's so low maintenance.
That's
right?
good. Well, mine is too. I really my wife is so that old adage. She's tighter than a cheap watch. Back in the day when you cranked you had to wind your watch up.
Yeah. And so the one thing that she likes, and it's just her, she likes them. She likes expensive purses.
My wife does too. And the ones that dealers, what are those really hot purses that they're on sale once a year?
Yeah, it's like Coaches or stuff like that. And Jen's, she's
Brahmin. Is it Brahmin? Brahmin.
I have no
I
clue.
think something like that. Yeah.
If I would have known that, I would have gave you my man card right now.
Okay. Well, okay, that's fine. And the only reason because she shops them and waits till they get to the right price, and she won't buy. She will buy nothing at full price.
Her deal is she likes those things, and that's what it is in there. And I come to find out that she bought an expensive one, a very expensive one, and I go, Jen, I mean, let's tear this thing down. Like, let's figure out why it's so nice and why it's so expensive. Come to find out, it's not actually real leather. It's not actually real.
It's pretty.
But it's pretty. And I go, why is it pretty to you? And she goes, it's the prestige of it.
Exactly.
And you had to build that brand of prestige, and the millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that went into building the prestige of the brand itself to create value. And now once you have value, that prestige,
but you got to maintain it.
You got to maintain it. There's a lot that goes into it, and that's where I think real brand is. And so,
but there's one thing that we always started branding sessions, and I'm talking. We worked with the Abuelos a lot. Lubbock National Bank, a lot of hospitals, even law firms. If you think about what's important, a brand for a law firm, it's pretty important for you to have the credibility that you're
good.
You're good.
Yeah.
You're good. And everybody wears a suit to work every day, too. They don't wear the baggy jeans and a hoodie. And that's another story. But I always start out with this kind of phrase, and I don't know whether it's original, but I've probably read it somewhere. But there's only two ways to brand. Would you like to take a guess of what those are?
I would probably say poorly, or somewhere about abstract, or it brands you instead of you branding.
You brand either by design or you brand by default.
There you go. That's where I was going with, and that's a good way to put it. So,
because if you don't define your brand, somebody's going to define it for you, and they're going to get it wrong.
Right. And you know how funny that you say that is. Wes's motto is like, you run life by default or you run it by design.
Exactly.
Right.
Same
structure, same philosophy. Yep. And I would say 80% of people do it by default.
Yeah. Name 3 local brands for me that have an excellent reputation and have maintained their brand for quite some time. Their brand integrity.
Man, that's hard. So I'd have to get more specific on what it is for me to recall like that.
Just random.
Just random?
Just random.
Just off the top of my head, I would say Vitality Bowl or Vitality Bowl. It would be a real.
Vitality Bowl's Carpet Tech.
I would say Carpet Tech's right there. I would say Carpet Tech. They've created
And
a
they
pretty
work
good
at
one.
it.
They work at it. Yeah, I'd say Carpet Tech's really done a really good job of branding. The Vitality Bowl is probably a punt because it's more of a regional brand. I'm having
Is
to
it really?
think.
I know who it is, but I don't know that much about them.
Yeah, but when I go in there, I know what I'm getting. I know what to expect. I know what it is, and I've really, really come to like that of it. Carpet Tech, and are you talking about? It's got to be local.
Well, regional.
Okay, so the
Or just has a presence here.
has a presence here. Yeah, they don't have a presence here, so let's skip that one. Man, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I would say Texas Tech.
That's interesting you say that.
I would say Texas Tech. I hate to say that, and I love to say that. I'm a huge Texas Tech Red Raider, but they do really do a good job.
They're getting better all the time at it, too.
Yeah, they are.
They have to.
Yeah, they're competing on a different level on multiple facets.
Yeah, some 40,000. They went have a new record for
Really?
enrollment that came out yesterday or the day before. But I think you'd have to include United.
I used to. I would say pre-acquisition.
Oh, I agree. It's still working at it. They still work at it.
I think they had the brand at Market Street, and I think, but when they were acquired, I think now I look at it as like, man, what's such a great brand that you destroyed.
Yeah, like Racer Classic Car Wash. It had all the controversy you see on. They were bought out by the Take 5 oil company, and they're getting hammered right now. But anyway, back to the five. I agree that it's very interesting you should say Texas Tech because I have a very structured, I'd love to show it to you, very structured branding presentation, how we get to the positioning statement, what is your essence, all these sort of things that are very important because like at Texas Tech, one of the real turning points for Texas Tech and their branding is when we went to the Final Four. All of a sudden, because I was on council and I actually had the LEDA do a run on me, and I said, "Can we find out how many?"
What's LEDA?
Lubbock Economic Development Alliance.
I gotcha.
They did some analysis of how many times was Texas Tech mentioned during that run for the Final Four, and let's try to do something, some monetize it. How much would it have cost us, our tech, to get that much publicity and that much name recognition and that, and so it really put us in a different place too. The fact, here's Texas Tech and they're playing for the Final Four. Right. It was millions and millions of dollars of people that never knew anything about tech. The other twist on it, people started identifying the fact that Texas Tech was in Lubbock. So Lubbock started benefiting from that as far as a city. And we had Economic Development Alliance. They started having people call up and wanting to know more about Lubbock.
Oh, I'm sure.
Possible businesses or expanding their business because of the Final Four.
Right.
But back to what you're saying, the building or creating a brand in some respects, and it's one brick at a time. It's one brick at a time, especially when you're establishing some of what you're wanting to accomplish, what you would like people to think about with your brand when they hear your name or see your logo.
So I want you to dive into that a little bit more because I get that it's going to take time. You're going to have to start with it, but how do you start is always what I try to dive into. Like, how do you get going on to building a brand? Because I think people put too much value in brand. Right now, I think they need to there's other things that you can value. The problem I have with brand building is doing this for 20 years, owning multiple agencies, is brand awareness has gotten extremely difficult to be able to monetize because there's so much engagement on brands everywhere. 25 years ago is really, really easy. I think easier. You were still inundated with like 20 different brands or 50 or 100 brands a day. Now I think it's in the tens of thousands.
Probably so.
Yeah. And so it's really, really hard. So I always look at, like, if you're building a brand, this is how I look at it. Think less about the brand and more about what you're offering, and then relate it back to the actual brand itself.
Oh, I agree. Well,
Right.
yeah.
So like our A, you know how much time in Alpha Capital we have this A, and it's an A, but it has these lines through it. I spent, and my old partner, he gave me such a hard time for this. I spent so much time designing that A. And he was like, Brandon, why is this important to you? And I go, because you have to think how you're going to interact with that logo. Mm-hmm. Right. And so if you're going to interact with that logo, and it's going to be an initial logo, so what is that going to mean for you? And the A and the lines through it made it look like it's very systematic. I wish I had, Ryan, can you put it up on the board somewhere?
Well, I can see one right there.
Yeah. Right. It's very systematic, and that's the full color one. And the one that we've kind of gone into has little lines into it, and it's easy to unfold. So it looks like it's unfolding when you do it. So we've got an animation where it literally unfolds. And so you're like, okay, it unfolds. Well, what's things that fold? Well, money folds. Right? When money folds, then so, complexity unfolds. So it's all about this unfolding financial complexity is where we go to. And that's kind of where we're at. When you unfold financial complexity, it means something to somebody, because what is the first thing that a consumer in finance tells you? It's too complex. It's too hard to understand. And I still struggle at that gap of communicating to consumers of what it is. And I don't know everything, but I know a little bit more than most people, of trying to steal that complexity back down to something that's simple that makes things work together. But I spend a lot of time, and I try to express this to people when I'm talking to them about their brand. One is, there's a lot of companies that don't need a brand. They're in such a B2B business, and I find it more B2B, right?
Yeah,
so
I agree.
that they're in B2B, it's more of a networking relationship marketing you need to do, and that's where you need to lead to, and not consumer-based marketing. But if you are in consumer-based marketing or B2C, however you want to phrase that, then you need to focus on it a little bit more. The second thing I always think about with marketing is people undervalue the cost of it, and they don't spend enough time engaging in it or spending enough money on it.
I agree.
So they believe, I throw a couple of grand at it, the problem's fixed, and it's going to be working tomorrow. That's not how it works.
That's not how it works.
Randy, how long does it take for the average business to engage in marketing before it works?
Oh, golly, it depends upon
the campaign.
It really depends upon leadership. It really does, and how much human equity and how much capital they're going to put into it. It could happen relatively quick, and especially if you have a breakthrough product or service that everybody wants. But for the average person, you never stop polishing your brand.
I agree, but I think it takes like at least 6 months to actually.
I was going to say a year
or a year.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
going to be a
year
year
if you can weather it, but 6 months. So when you go into it, and I always see these guys that are like, hey, they're going to lip into it, and they're going to give you, 3 months to build a brand, and here's a couple of $1,000s to do it every single month to do it. And I'm going, just save your money, buddy. Yeah. Right? Yeah, you're 6 months to start seeing the. I'm not saying where it's a campaign where it's like a direct lead campaign or a direct consumer product. Hey, I'm on a sale or something like that. I'm talking about building a brand where you don't need the sale to generate the results.
Well, and somebody sees your brand and they know exactly who you are, and what you're about.
Correct.
Because then you're talking about B2B. You get into that B2B situation, like I told you that we did branding for several law firms. Well, you don't go out.
You don't need a law firm every day, but when you need one, you need one.
You want the best one.
Right.
I said, I want to do business with that guy.
Right.
Because you built your brand to such a level and a reputation, and you may not know exactly how their success rate with their customers are, but you've done enough branding for people to go, I want to give those guys a try. It was always our goal, and I told our clients, if you could get in the top 3 recognized I'm going to use experts in your category, and let's just continue with the law firm deal, you're going to get a chance at the business.
Yep.
You're going to get a chance at the
100%.
business. Yep. If you put on your A game and go win it, but they're going to come talk to you because those guys are good.
And it's really like you're past the ability or you're past the general consumer to actually say, are you competent?
Exactly.
And that I think that's where marketing comes in. So there's different levels of marketing, but there's a lot of services and products out there you don't need every day, right? And I think Carpet Tech does this really well.
They do a good job.
Right. They do a good job on a lot of things. But I think one is they played off at Texas Tech. They had a relationship with Texas Tech. I think she played at Texas Tech and he had a relationship there. But he played off of that to a level where it allowed him to tie his brand recognition into Texas Tech early on. But then he built the brand to the point where he literally focused on am I credible? Am I competent? Am I trustworthy? And I think that's where brands really go with. And if you got those three things, you're already winning in a room, right? So when you call up, you know it's not a fly-by-night person that's you're going to have to deal with. You know it's somebody that has credibility. Now, there's also something to be said on the back end of that, like you're talking about earlier with the hospital.
Yeah.
You got to answer the phone right. You got to communicate to the consumer right.
Exactly.
You have to be respectful, honoring in all those situations. And when you do all those things right and you bring the brand awareness to it, it's pretty important.
Well, it's one of those
it's
cliche terms that I've used 100 times. You got to be big on the little things. You got to be big on the little things, and that's answering the phone.
It is, and I learned that. I learned that today. And so the little things, I could have done a little bit better in our agency. And if I'd done those little things better, communicated a little bit better, I think you have to be well-rounded in that. And this is where, I never say I know it all. I try to know as much as I possibly can, but I get it wrong just like everybody else does. And my point is I got it wrong to a degree where if I would have communicated a little bit better today, but I communicated a little bit better over the last 3 months with a whole bunch of team members and a whole bunch of clients, I think the culture would have been a little bit different. And not that we did anything wrong or bad. It just we went over a speed bump today, and we're going to keep going at that same pace and path and speed. It's just like, man, if you would tighten the bolt a little bit here and gone a little bit slower instead of 98, you went 97 miles an hour.
Yep.
You could have addressed a couple of these issues. So with that, you said something that's really, really neat, and I think that we need to transition into, because I'm really wanting to talk to you about this.
One example, if it indulge me, I was in my late 20s, early 30s with our and we had our ad agency. We were working, and the lead agency on the merger between St. Mary's and Methodist Hospital. A new brand, which is now everybody knows as Covenant.
Sure.
But that was probably as good an experience for a young guy to have, because I was working with the big dogs, the Alan Whites and all those people that were, chairmen of the boards of these hospitals. And where I'm getting at, they were concerned about blending in the two cultures, a Catholic hospital and a Methodist hospital. How are you going to do that? And we had the budget. They did it right. It was back in the day where there was 3 shifts at the hospitals. I remember getting up at 2:00 in the morning and doing focus groups with staff. That is the old graveyard shift or whatever you want to call it. But we didn't leave anybody out, and everybody, and probably not 100%, but I'd like to think 99% of all the employees had an opportunity to say how we should blend those two cultures. And back to that, asking opinion.
Yeah, having a voice.
And it made it so good, and we alleviated so many problems that everybody thought we were going to have. But all we did is the brand was already working in regards to Covenant, because we were building that brand, and they didn't even know it when we were doing those focus groups, because we took all that.
Did y'all have to come up with the name there?
Quite honestly, I don't remember where it came from. Specifically, it was probably a group deal where, we were all throwing things and talking. But I think somebody on the board recommended the name, and we, spun dry it and all that other sort of stuff, and it made sense. And everybody knows the brand now.
Yeah, it's a yeah.
But that was part of the building brand process. Once again, asking the opinion of employees, and we weren't asking them what they thought about Covenant. We were thinking about, we were asking them questions of what do you know about Methodist Hospital? What do you know about St. Mary's Hospital? And then we even started having some combined focus groups. We started them with just Methodist people and St. Mary's people. Then we started going back again and having focus groups with the I'm going to call them blended groups. But I learned so much from that and I don't even know whether I really knew what I know about branding now. I don't really think I was that smart enough at that young age to know that was really we were doing branding.
Sure.
So out of default, I learned a lot about branding from that project. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you.
I think that's really interesting. I want to shift gears too. I really do. This is you're talking about branding, marketing, and everything that goes into it, and I think that's where we're at right now, and it's such a negative way when it gets into the political sphere. And so, and give context here. So you're ran a pretty successful ad agency for a long time, and then you turn around and shifted into being a congressman for the city of Lubbock for 4 years, right? And is that a 2-year term or a 4-year term?
It's a 4.
It is a 4-year term. And then, so how was that? How did you go and approach that? Because I'm curious on that, because I got to tell you, like whenever, long time in the future, like way in the future, like I can't tell you how far in the future, but it's going to be a long time. I might actually run for some offices there.
You ought to.
And so it's something that is kind of gnawing on me a little bit. And so, but it's not anything that I would ever consider for the next at least decade. Just because I'm so overwhelmed with what I got going on here. And I think whenever I get to the point where I'm ready to retire, kind of like what you did at your day job, that you kind of want to serve the community. And I want to do it in such a way that is like, I think is, one, I want to define the terms that I'm going to be in there. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to make sure that I come out with less money than I went in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You get my point with that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so things like that could be where you're actually how the founding fathers believed it should be, where you're a servant and you're there to serve the community that's treated you so well in growing your business and being an entrepreneur. So things like that I think is really, really interesting. But how did you go about doing it? How did you get started in it? What made you think, hey, I'm going to run? And then you didn't? All right, you got to tell me the story then.
I didn't. Actually, I had 3 people call me and ask me and said, would you consider running for city council? And I go, are you kidding me? They said, yeah, come over and talk to us. And these are some folks that I've known for 20 plus years, and maybe a couple of them longer than that. And they knew first of all, they knew of my business. They knew what the business I'm in, and they knew the work ethic that I have. But they said, we've never known you to go into a meeting with an agenda. And these are people that I've worked for either as vendors or consultants or clients. Your business, you have to be a good listener. You have to be a good listener in the agency business when you talk to a client. You're trying to figure out what's going wrong and what's going right. And they said that you've always been really, really good at that. And they said the other thing, the scope of the businesses that you represented over the years, you're basically a walking chamber of commerce, so to speak. There's not many. There's not many business or industry classifications that I hadn't worked with. I help build businesses. I help fix businesses. I help, do those things that an agency does. So your skill sets would be invaluable as a council person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you're in healthcare, you're in every facet, retail. There isn't so
B2B, B2C, politicals. I always said there's really only about 4 or 5 classifications of clients that you have, and that's a person, a product, a service, a cause, and I forget the 5th one, but you see what I'm saying.
Sure.
So I said, "Oh, okay."
A purpose.
I was kind of, and plus it was a good time in my life that I could would not have any conflicts because I was not in the agency business anymore, which is a very important thing to consider if you're a business person, because you're going to lose some clients if you decide to run and you vote yes when they think you should have voted no.
Yeah, and so there's a huge deal being registered with the SEC. There's a huge deal we can't even. I haven't checked on this, but I'm 99.9% sure we can't run. And even if we can run, if it's anything that has to do with finance, especially in the public market. So if it was a major market, I think there'd be a huge conflict. But I think in small markets where, like, if there was a bond, something that happened like that.
No, that would probably be good to have some of that knowledge.
Yeah, but I don't even think I could vote on it. I don't think I could.
Well, you could recuse. I recused myself once.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's things like that I wouldn't want to be in it. So like I said, it's not anytime near soon. It's the next 10, maybe 15 years down the road.
But anyway, so I said, okay, this is. I said, let me think about it. Of course, I prayed about it a lot too. And I went home and Margaret said, well, what did they want to talk to you about? And that's my wife.
Sure.
What did they want to talk to you about? And I said, well, they wanted me to consider running for a city council. And there was this long silence. I'm going, oh man, I wish I had my asbestos underwear on right now, because this could get a little warm in here. But she looked at me and she walked over and she said, how many times have I told you that I thought you would make a great councilman? I said, well, I at least got one vote.
Yeah.
At least I got one vote. And what happened was I didn't have, I was uncontested. And people that are smarter than I am, they started looking at my contribution list and they said, no, we're not going to run against him on that deal, because not only was and I didn't have a whole, I mean, I think I did my campaign for maybe 30,000, somewhere in there, all bundled together.
How important is it, the money side? I know it is, but just from the inside looking out. And this is my theory, that it's going to get a lot more expensive as we grow, because there's more consequences or opportunities. Well, that's not a good way to phrase it. We're getting to a point where a little money can be a bad thing. On the district races in our community, it's going to start costing more because people are going to want their candidate, and it's not. Fortunately, with the city, you don't have to be affiliated with a political party. But it's changing rapidly, and that's because part of it is our growth. Yeah, I would think it's even worse here. But and so, what did you use that money for? Like, that's what I'm trying to drive into. Like, I don't understand why it costs. I don't even know what it is. I think it's a couple $100 million to run for political office. Run, is that what it is?
Somewhere in that range.
Yeah, a couple $100 million, and there's things like a lot of people don't understand. There's these super PACs and these dark pools and all these things that go into it. So I wanted to kind of dive into it. What do you spend money on in a political campaign besides just, hey, I'm buying commercial time? I think everybody gets that part, but I think there's a lot more to it, because you have to, the ones I've known, I've never been a part of one, I don't want to be a part of one, but the ones I've known with were guys that you literally have to hire almost like a CEO of your campaign to run.
You better have a campaign
manager.
Chairman.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how in depth these things get, and they line up your interviews, they line up your, how all of your print media,
neighborhood meetings,
everything. I mean,
walking blocks.
There's a lot that goes into it, and then you got to get volunteers. There's money goes out the window on every single thing that you have to do. It's just not free anymore, which is sad, but it's not. So once you get into office, I mean, is that what you really spent your money on? Is, hey, most of it was traditional, and you think about, especially if you do in a direct mailing anymore. Just the postage. The cost of postage is ridiculous, on the stuff like that, especially if you do multiple mailers. So what do you do? You're sending out postage, just kind of getting your name out there, telling people that you're running? Yeah, a brochure to their house, and it shows you who you are, what you're for. Very simple, content in them, but she's got to be out there. How do they know to vote for you if they don't know who you are? Sure. It's really is. It's a lot of it's name ID. Yeah. So did you measure a lot of that?
Not really, because I didn't have an opponent.
Yeah, you didn't need to, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was a totally different deal. But once I got in the office, I really did enjoy it because people really don't have a clue how a city runs.
Yeah,
and what it
explain-
takes
I
in
don't.
the mechanics of it and the complexities of it. I told everybody that after the first year of office, there's 3 things I learned, and that is, I don't care what side the size of the city it is, it's an engineering marvel. Because you go to that switch, you turn it on, the lights come on. You turn the faucet on, the water comes out. And the most important one is flushing the toilet. Right. How does all that happen? If you drill down, and it is crazy how many, and you know that, the pipes that are running underneath us right now, how does all that happen? And it takes a lot of smart people and a lot of advanced planning, and I think that's one thing that I really am proud about Lubbock, that it's a very, compared to other cities, it is a very well-planned city for flow of traffic. And because I lived in Abilene for about 6 months one time, and that's like somebody threw some spaghetti out, and as far as the streets are over there compared to the way we are, easy to get around. So if you can count to 130 and you know your alphabet, you can get around Lubbock pretty easy.
Yeah, it's a big giant grid.
It's a big giant grid.
ABC 1, 2, 3. That's pretty much all it is.
Exactly.
It's very smart on that side of it. Now we got loops and fixing to have outer loops and things around that, but
the
gist of it is
what we've set in place as far as even, the last thing I really worked a lot on was the uniform development codes for the city, where we were going back and look at all the coding, every coding classification or whatever that hadn't been looked at since the 80s. We had to update it. But one of those things is making sure spacing between houses, streets. We don't have streets, we have runways.
You're right.
And I've always said that our big and wide streets are a blessing and a curse.
They are. I am concerned about Lubbock in the utility side. I think that's going to be problematic as we go down. I know they need to expand. We had to get off of it, but we've created a monopoly here and to a certain degree. And so I am concerned on some of that side of it. And I'm concerned on how, we treated that, especially since Texas got a bad rap on our utility infrastructure. Texas really has. And then, right after that, we switched off of it. And I'm waiting to see a hard winter, how bad this is going to get. So,
well, and I think that it's still, we did the right thing, I think, by getting on ERCOT. There's no question about it in my mind.
Explain why, because I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Well, it really did open up competition that we never had before. Because you're going to be able to select your utility provider. Before, you had either XL or LPL.
Yeah, but from what I understand, the infrastructure's still there, so you're still tied into the same thing. You're just paying now to be on a variable grid. So you're in open markets is what, so if you lose it and markets go to $2,000 a kilowatt, you're paying $2,000 a kilowatt.
Well, so you might be paying that if it was still LPL too.
No, it was fixed. That's the problem, where we didn't have those massive bills coming back to it, but we had to expand. I don't disagree with what you're saying.
Well,
Randy.
we had a choice. So we spend a bunch of money and build natural gas power generating facilities that probably would be obsolete in 10 years, or you to do what we do right now. I mean, you have, and I appreciate those people that said, well, we need to spend money on LPL and create those power plants. But the maintenance of them, if you look at it in total, I think in the years to come, we will see that this was the right thing to do. What's going to happen with the power grid if we have a big winter? I wish I could tell you what's going to happen. But I think that for years and years and years, the consumer didn't like just having LPL.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I'm 100%. Like,
so
we have the most expensive.
We basically gave our citizens what they wanted.
Yeah,
an opportunity to shop.
And I disagree. I think the biggest problem we had was going back. Was it in the 80s or 90s? I can't remember when SIPC went out, and remember that huge marketing campaign to go LPL. It's Lubbock owned. It's all going to be one thing. And if you look at the pricing from LPL since that merger back in, was it the 90s?
Probably so. Probably.
And
so.
I still remember that
late
campaign.
80s, early 90s. Something like that.
I mean there was a huge media campaign on that, and I remember that one, and then going, because that pretty much created a monopoly. And then we had 20, 25 years of that, and now we're back into saying, and I just think, again, marketing, going back to marketing, Randy, I don't think a lot of people know that there's choice here and how to get to the choice.
No.
Right? And so an LPL is not going to advertise it. You know, they want
there's
to
no
preserve
reason
it.
for them to, actually. I equate, and this is not the best analogy, but what LP&L is going to become is they're going to become Atmos Energy. In other words, they're going to deliver the power.
Correct.
Based upon the infrastructure that was already in place with LP&L, and we get a transfer fee, which will be great things. It'll bring new revenue in for the city because of that transfer fee. But that's basically what Atmos is. Atmos doesn't produce any energy. They just take it from wherever it's coming from to your house.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yep.
And most people don't know that either.
I'd love to dig into that in another interview.
We'll do it again, man.
Yeah, we'll do this one again because I really want to get into that side of it because I'm really worried about our infrastructure in Texas. As much as Texas is growing, we got to be really careful here on how that's done.
Well, I still, as I said before we even started doing this, with all the nonsense that's going on in the country, I don't think there's any place else I'd rather be than Lubbock in West Texas right now. Well, it's a good place.
So what did you not like about the political side of it and sitting in that Congress meetings? How did that transition go? Like do they walk in, you're elected and going like how do you learn the rules and the procedures and the structure? I mean, the system. I mean, it's not like you were raised inside of that political sphere. So how did you navigate those waters to understand it?
Well, once again, I think some of the things that I was involved with early on in my career, and I encourage young people to do all of this. I was on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce. I was on the executive committee for the Chamber of Commerce. The same way with United Way. So as far as and then I was involved in some other boards and deals where I at least understood procedurally how a meeting should be conducted. First of all.
Okay.
Yeah. Robert's Rules of Orders, some of those other things. Every industry or business has their own vernacular, so I had to first learn all of the acronyms for everything that's involved at City Hall, and that took a while. But the first thing they did is they give me the budget book. But there's like 2 big volumes like this of for the city budget, and I just started diving into them. I went to other former council members and got some counseling. So what happened is, for me, is I had been involved in those things and had those relationships where I went back to the mentors and especially some of the people that had served as mayors or councilmen, and they said, they really mentored me. So when I had that first gavel of our first meeting,
you didn't feel like a fish out of water.
No, I wasn't. Plus, we had a really good group, and for me, also, it was the fact that I was the only newbie on that council because a previous councilman, she had resigned to run for county judge. So I had 6 other people that had been serving for at least 2 years prior to before me coming on. So it wasn't like what we have now. We have, 4 new councilmen that have never served on the council before. I mean, they're good people, but that's somewhat problematic when you have that big a turnover on a council. Everybody's learning at and what pace they learn and what they're bringing as far as experience and other situations. Like I told you, we're in Chamber of Commerce and in United Way. I was just already had been experiencing some things that involved some critical things, but actually involved boards and executive committees.
That's interesting. So learning was an easy side of that, but you brought up something I want to switch to. So you're saying, because it gave me a different perspective here, but I don't know. I still think there's problems here. So let's talk about term limits for a second, because you're saying if you have a whole lot of new people inside of there, then that could be problematic, right? Just because everybody does,
it slows things down.
I could agree to that, right? I think it gives new perspective, new vision, new things on the side of there. So I could imagine it slows a lot of things down. That could be definitely a good accurate description. But what's your perspective on a national, regional level on having term limits? Like I sat in a meeting with a congressman, state congressman, and there's like 40 of us in there, and he's giving this speech and all that stuff. And somebody finally asked him, and I was a little irritated because I wanted to challenge you with it because he, hey, how long are you going to run? And he said, hey, I don't want to run. It was such a diplomatic answer. I don't want to run and be in this position for the rest of my life. But he wouldn't answer the question, right? He wouldn't say, hey, I'm here for 3 terms or I'm here for 2 terms.
They're not going to say it.
They're not going to say it because they know once they get a hold of it.
I wouldn't say it.
I would hope. What's the statistic on that, Ryan? I think it's like 92% incumbents.
The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.
All right, so hey, jumping back into it real quick, and Ron looked this up for us when we were on break. Ron, what was it, 6,900?
Yes, it was 6,278.
6,278.
Yeah, and 408 of them lost.
408?
408. And
400. So that's a 93% incumbent actually win. So, and this is where I'm like, blows my mind for one deal. One aspect of it, but the extremism from both sides or all sides comes from that one fact.
Absolutely. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So they know they can't get out, so they can say whatever they want anymore. They can do whatever they want. And the funny thing is, I've never heard of one of those guys coming out with less money than when they went in.
Of course they don't.
Yeah, and so it's even on a local level.
Oh my gosh,
I've
yes.
known a couple of these guys, and they've made some money.
Yeah,
they've made some money, because they had either the inside information of where the economics is going for a city, a state, right, or a country. Or they either did some sideways deals that under the table because they don't have to report everything. It's funny though, in my business, how much I have to report.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I have to
report the banking industry in general,
everything.
finance industry.
Yeah, I have to report everything. Every email's looked at. I can't even text message. I have to go through a third-party application to text to actually be able to be captured and recorded.
Well, see, Margaret knows a lot about that as an internal auditor at a bank. The regulations of the bank is overwhelming, and
it's insane, right?
Well, it's not even in some respects, and I don't mean to make it sound this lightly, but working for McGavick, just registering vehicles, keeping up on vehicles, the paperwork that a dealership does behind the scenes that is crazy too. But there's nobody regulates the regulators. So to speak.
No, it's nobody regulates the regulator. But my point being, so think about that from my perspective. I'm a small business owner that just has a dozen employees. These guys are running the country, and they don't have to report any of their holdings until post transaction, and then even there, it's questioned.
But we've almost been enabling
questionable.
We've been enabling them to a degree, the citizenry, I think.
And hold on. Here's my deal. I don't think it's that. I think it's the fact that you give them power, they're not going to self-regulate that power. And so they're not going to put policies in place that says, oh, I can't invest in individual stocks. Yeah. Oh, I can't actually run for 14 terms. I mean, we're on the day of who's the California Feinstein just passed away, 90 years old in office. This is absolutely insane. So the only ones that are running our country right now are senile, and they're typically...
Well, I'm working on that one.
in their 70s, 80s, or 90s.
No,
it's nuts.
I'll be 72 on October the 13th. Am I as sharp as I was when I was 62? I'd be lying to you. I mean, I've got it together, but my energy levels are not where they are. But I mean, it's just a part of aging. That doesn't necessarily mean that it cripples your mental skills and your to be able to lead and do some stuff like that. But I do think that we need to have a society that is somebody my age is willing to say, yeah, we need to turn it over to the next generation, or they're going to be 72 years old and I'm still going to be in office.
So we have this debate in the office. Do you believe anybody after Social Security is 66 years old should be able to run for public office?
I think that's something that we need to talk about because it's some of the same principles that corporate America does. Pilots.
Yeah.
Pilots.
Right. It's
Do
crazy.
I want
a 68 or 72 or 88-year-old person flying a plane? No.
And that's look at
and these guys get to make decisions on going to war.
Look at our in the Senate, Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
He froze
Give
multiple
me a
times.
break.
Yeah.
You know, that's not what you want. But my point is, regardless of whether it's greed and need and power, but if we're really going to be true to ourselves, we need to look at 65, 66. You probably need to retire.
Yeah, you can't run
and
for
turn
office.
it over to the next generation.
If you're 64 and you ran for office and you got elected and you're not coming out until you're 68,
right,
that's fine.
Especially as a senator.
As a senator, that's fine. That's fine. But if you're 66 years old on election day, you should not be able to run.
But your generation has got. That's not. I'm not going to be able to do that.
Nobody's going to be able to do it. They're not going to vote themselves out of office. So this is the only way.
Keep pressing it.
We've had a great conversation around it. The only way this gets done is we, as a society of people, have to say the first criteria, because there's still 400 people that get voted in every year. It's only 6%, but 6% gets voted in. In order to be voted in, a prerequisite for the individual for me to vote for them, they have to sign some type of pledge that says they will not run for more than 3 consecutive terms.
Well, you're going to have few and far between that would ever do that.
That's my point. Until that as a society comes together and says that, because they're not going to vote for it, they'll keep pandering like they're going to actually make that into a law. They're never going to make that into a law. But us as a society actually comes back and says, hey, look, I'm not voting for you until you sign that pledge. Yeah. Right? And then you get enough people to sign that pledge, and then you hold them to it. And if they break that pledge and run again, then you just don't vote for them.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? They're automatically nixed out. So we have to take, as a society, have to take control back eventually. And this is where I'm like a big fan of Vivek right now, is like we have the government. I mean, our Constitution is fear the citizens. The citizens should not fear the government. I think we're in a place right now.
Oh yes,
where we
definitely
fear the government. Like I do fear the government right now because they can come in and just invent things that you broke the law. Invent things. They've taken away more freedoms in the last 4 years than I've ever heard of. And maybe it's happened. I know it's happened. It's happened in Germany. It's happened all over the country in multiple generations, and it keeps on repeating over and over and over and over again. But it's fixing to happen here. Like if we do not take power back from our government and restrict our government's ability to do the things that they're doing, it's scary on where we're going to go in the next 20 to 50 years.
2024 is going to be
a shit show.
It's a make or break. It's a make or break.
It's a shit show.
It really is. And the point of it is the rampant corruption on both sides of the aisle, if you will. There's plenty to go around.
Oh yeah, unlimited.
But the power, that's what the DC is all about. It really is the swamp, because people go there with good intentions, but they drink the swamp water, and they pander to people, and it is the profile of playing to somebody's ego from some guy that owned a hardware store in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and suddenly he is a congressman, and he goes to D.C., and all of a sudden he's going, gosh, how did that money get in my pocket?
Right.
I could use that. I'm not making that much money as a congressman. The hardware store is kind of okay. It really is, and it sounds, we are in a process, and we're in a period, I believe, that we really are. It's a good against evil.
It is.
That's the easiest way to put it. There are people that want to put America in its place because we've been too fat and happy. We have something going on here that people are jealous of, or it is they really truly want to create an oligarchy type a culture that the rich and whoever thinks they're influential and smart, that we need to take care of everybody else.
That's where I was going with, and you're diving into the World Economic Forum. We have a lot of conversations about the WE. It's if you haven't looked up the World Economic Forum, go look it up. Go look at what they're doing. It is absolutely, and they're not even hiding it.
Is it the lady that's in charge?
No, it's what is it? It's Schwab. The guy's last name's Schwab, but the lady, she's a part of it, and they're saying they want, not very indirectly. I mean, they're saying it diplomatically, but it's 90% reduction in our population. They want us to eat bugs. They want to take global banking to and here's the thing, and I've talked to a couple bankers. I got really upset over this one about 6 months ago. If you ever believe that the government digital currency is a good thing, that is the scariest thing I think I've ever seen. And that is being pushed right now. There's platforms that are being opened up from a government level just to clear currencies, and that's their first stage of it. And they're that a digital government currency is what they want. And so it really, if they do that, and we allow them to do that, and we're already there with credit cards, and to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
But we're not at the point where they can shut it off. And you saw that in Canada. This is where I'm a big advocate. And I sat down with the president of a major life insurance company, and he goes, "There's no reason we should have this many banks." And I go, "You're insane." He goes, "We should be like Canada." I go, "You're smoking." And he's got well,
he lives in a different
genre.
Different. I mean, a level of yeah.
And I go, I get it. He's got a perspective. He's an actuary. He knows. He's smart as all get out. He knows a perspective I probably don't understand. But from my perspective. Look what happened to Canada. They didn't like the truckers. They didn't like what's going on, and they seized all of those bank accounts in Canada because they could control 4 or 5 banks. Now, if you go to a digital currency and you want to go get water outside of the area you want to go to, or that they don't want you to go to, that 15-minute thing that they're trying to do in Europe right now, then they're just going to shut off your ability to buy it. If they don't like you buying bullets in Texas, they're just going to prevent you from buying them. And if you have to clear, and this is, me and Jen went to Texas Tech, and this is where I'm not happy with Texas Tech. It is a cashless platform at Texas Tech. It's credit card only.
Yeah, it is.
And this is where I'm like, right? And I looked it up when I was there. I took a picture of it on my phone looking, is the cash not a legal tender in the United States that is required to accept? And until we and it's not.
Interesting.
It is not. So they do not have to accept legal tender now. And so think about what goes on there. So if you go through a credit card, that bank gets a fee, that credit card company gets a fee. Everybody gets to take a little chunk out of that dollar. So it's socialism at its finest. If it's legal tender, right? If it's cash, it's freedom. And they don't get a cut of it. And so everybody gets to eat from that trough if they use that credit card here. So I'm becoming more and more as a consumer. Here's the hard part about that, right? So as a business owner, it's extremely harder for me to take a deduction if I don't run it through a credit card.
Okay.
Right? Because I have to prove I had that transaction, right?
Yeah,
and so
right.
when you don't do that, it becomes a lot harder.
You got to have a record of it.
You got to have a record of it, right? And you can keep the receipts and say that, but it's really a unique situation in today's time to say, hey, I paid cash for everything, right? You go to try to deposit cash.
Why are you doing that?
Yeah, right? And
then
you
got problems?
Yeah.
You have some credit problems?
It's suspicious.
It is suspicious.
Right? And so any auditor come in, you're going to say, you paid cash for all of your transactions, and transactions are so big. I mean, banks don't even have money now, which gets you into fractional banking is the worst thing we've ever done in our society. Fractional banking is right up there along with the Fed. And we're going really deep into our weekly conversation.
Well, that's great. I mean,
you understand
it's very
fractional banking is?
My biggest worry is for my grandkids.
And my daughter's 18. Yeah. She just sent me a text. She got her first A in chemistry.
Oh, my goodness.
And she's going to be a doctor. And I'm just so proud of her. I'm going.
But do you really want to be a doctor?
I know, right? But at the same time, I'm going, I honestly believe I'm gonna leave my daughter and my 2 daughters and my son in a absolute worse environment than what I grew up in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're past the, hey, did we actually get thing? And now you got people coming on that are saying it's a good thing that kids are not, they're having hardships, and we in the United States has been such a good, prosperous country for so long. We need this hardship. We need to open these things up.
But the thing that we're losing, and once again back to, I truly believe our West Texas culture could be a saving grace for our country. In the respect that I always joke about the 4-letter word that we use all the time that a lot of people have forgot how to use, and that's WORK.
Yeah,
Work. How simple. You and I grew up, and we have a heritage of people that rolled up their sleeves and they got dirty and they did their work and they did the things to make life better for their families. But it all was about work. If you don't have a good work ethic and you don't understand the value of work and what it does to you personally, professionally, and spiritually, you got a problem.
It's a hard thing that people have to learn, that owning and running a business is extremely difficult.
It looks very cushy from the outside.
It does. It looks like, man, you're just running a company. You didn't understand that there's, for the 8 to 10 hours that you see somebody working in a business.
Oh, you think about it in the shower.
Yeah, it's 24/7.
I'm serious. If you own your own business, you think about it 24/7. I don't care if they're lying, if you don't say, because you're always thinking, and that's the beauty of owning your own business too. You're plotting your own destiny, and you create opportunities. You create your own opportunities, as in my opinion.
And you create opportunities for other people.
Exactly. And last night they had got to digress just a little bit because I'm so proud. They had the West Texas Hall of Fame ceremony last night. I don't know but it's the one where Buddy Holly statue is. And all the plaques all there. A guy named Dirk Fowler was recognized, and he's going to have his name on the plate. I gave him his first job.
Really? That's awesome.
I gave him his first job, and you really ought to look him up. He's known internationally for his block prints, posters, and go to F2 Designs. But he literally has stuff hanging in different collections all over the world, and he's making them right here. But what I'm getting at is he grew up out by Childers in a farm or ranch up there. He's maintained his work ethic and his, I'm going to call them West Texas values, even though he's selling these prints for thousands and thousands of dollars, and he's making them in his shop over in Tech Terrace. But he still wants to be here because this is a good place.
It is a good place, right? We got so far away from the politics of actually what it was like for you to be in politics. So rewind for me for 30 seconds so I could do this, and then we'll conclude here.
I'd love to come back and do it, but there's a couple of things that.
What did you learn? What did you take away? And what would you tell people that are looking at running for office?
Always remember what every vote that you cast, you're going to make somebody happy or glad, and you're going to make somebody sad. And they're probably the sad ones are going to come and tell you about it.
Sure.
The ones that you voted the way that they think you should have voted. But you're always going to have a conflict with somebody, whether it's internally at City Hall because you're trying to get a project moved forward, or your constituents. The most calls I got of complaints from constituents, if you can believe this, is alleys and dumpsters.
I'm sure.
Alleys and dumpsters. But also while I was on council, and I had this brought to my attention by people that had served previously as mayors and councilmen, is that probably we had two of the most contentious events maybe in a long time in city, the history of the city. It's COVID and Sanctuary City for the Unborn. Both of them were losers if you were on council, because you were not going to make anybody happy how you address that.
No matter which way you went.
No matter which way you went. Now, COVID, a lot of people thought that we had more authority on what we could or couldn't do with COVID and what was going on that. But like 2 weeks into it, 2 or 3, 4 weeks into it, basically the governor took over, and dictated a lot of things that he just dictated a lot of things in regard to COVID. I was never, matter of fact, I fought shutdowns, but they were shutting down non-essentials. The big box stores got to stay in business. I'm going, that's not right.
That was my big complaint. I was fixing to ask you that. So what control did you have there? Because here's the thing is, so all they did is say there's local businesses that had grocery stores, local businesses but the big box guys, and this is the corruption to the 10th degree. So these guys are now designated that they can run their business and make money and make more money because now they got market share out of it. And then the small business owner got screwed out of this thing.
Quite
and
honestly,
then we printed money to everybody.
I couldn't tell you how.
Did they come to you? How did that happen?
Well, it was the edicts that came down from the governor's office.
I understand, but who delivered you that news? Do you have is there a local attorney? I know there is that says, here's what the guidelines are. Here's what you can say.
Right. Pretty much. From a state level, attorney general.
So Attorney General came into Lubbock, Texas, or did y'all's local?
But that was the process. That was probably where it came down from. It came down from a state level, and it was sent to the mayor.
And it was sent to the mayor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the mayor had a conversation with its internal legal and everything.
Our legal, the mayor, city managers, blah 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 blah, and then they brought it.
Did y'all have a meeting?
Oh yeah, we'd have executive committee meetings.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
So this was coming down.
Right.
Yeah, this is.
And there was no pushback on this.
Well, you could. What are you going to? My pay grade for city councilman versus a governor is a little bit different, and he has the authority to do it.
I know, but here's what I've learned in law, and this is one thing I've really learned this. The law is, everybody thinks the law is the law. Here's the law, and this is what the law says, and this is what it is. The law is just interpretation. Okay. And so if you understand that, and you're saying somebody broke the law and they're going to jail. No, what they did is I'm not talking about the mass murderers and the rapists. I'm talking about the technicality of law. And the law is absolutely just, they broke the law that was detrimental to an interpretation of the law, and that law or that interpretation weren't won over. So the question I had is, was there questions about the interpretation of what the governor said? Hey, here's what it is. Do you shut down for exactly 2 weeks? When does that 2 weeks start? When does it stop? Does he have executive order to reinforce that? What is considered to be a essential business inside of that can stay open? Did he actually say inside of there that it had to be specifically box stores, large box stores, or did you allow the local?
It's actually a category of store, a category of businesses more than anything.
So local grocery stores could have stayed open.
I wish somebody would have defied it. To be honest with you.
Oh, I know somebody that.
And so there's a lot of people
they
that
wanted
did.
to, yeah.
But I also think at that time we were entering some territories that I certainly hadn't ever been a part of. Because, some of the early things, I'll be real honest with you, when we started seeing COVID and we started some of the death numbers, especially in New York and all, and we know that was crazy. But where would this disease go? I really didn't. I literally had thoughts of, the Black plagues and those sort of things that happen in the history of the world. What do we really? I don't know. I'm not a doctor, and what happened if we defied everything and we didn't do some of the things that we all have had friends that died from COVID. I've had several friends that died from COVID here too.
My father died from COVID.
Well, basically he did.
Yeah, I mean his death certificate says COVID.
Post-COVID.
Yeah. And
so it's it was one of those situations as a councilman. It's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if I take a position here and all of a sudden we have thousands of people in Lubbock, Texas dying, but if it was one of those situations that I hope never happens again, and I wouldn't wish it on any councilman in the future for nothing.
It's fixing to happen again. And here's the thing that
I agree with this. We know a lot more.
Scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
So look what just happened over the last 2 weeks, right? So if anybody knows me for longer than 2 seconds, I am the biggest Chiefs fan.
Oh, Chiefs fan. Okay.
right? I mean, I am a Patrick Mahomes
Mahomes.
man crush.
Yeah.
I'm from Texas Tech. He played here at Texas Tech.
Well, I got to hang out with him a little bit when we were doing this stuff for
I've
McGowan.
not met a guy that said a bad thing about that man. They said his integrity is awesome. He's just down to earth Texas boy. Does everything right. But his best friend's Travis Kelce, and he's now dating Taylor Swift.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
But did you see
Well,
what?
she's just looking for the title and some lyrics for another song.
I know, right? It just needs another divorce deal. But my point at going into it is I was really, really disappointed in Kelce.
Oh yeah,
taking
Why?
the Pfizer.
Why did he do that?
I mean, I tweeted it to him. And
How much did they pay him? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea. But
they had to pay him a ton.
So let's unwind here for 2 seconds. Here,
Okay.
Right. So one is we have to get pharmaceutical companies out of advertising. You're an advertising guy. There's
it's
no
horrible.
reason. We're the one of, I think, only 2 countries in the world that actually have pharmaceutical companies actually able to advertise in it. And it props up the entire media companies. Like all the media companies, I think the mass majority, I think it could be as high as what, 70, 80%?
Well, it's either pharmaceuticals or automobiles.
I think it's up to 70% now.
Well,
in
it is, but those are the
pharmaceuticals.
the lion's share of advertising that you see.
Yeah, for the big ones, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have that, then you already have something baked into it.
Of course you do.
Right? And so now we know that, and I'm not saying this is like me, like this is like subjective. CDC, which I think is completely corrupt.
Right.
CDC even came out and finally had to disclose that mitochondritis in boys is a thing, right? Now you have the number 1 tight end in the world actually promoting to get a COVID booster, right?
Unhealthy males.
Unhealthy males. Like, how does that play? Where does Kansas City actually sit and go, hold on 1 second? So I'm advertising to, youth boys that want to be like Travis Kelce. And my second thing I'm doing is we know this kills young boys, right? Or it creates such a horrible thing inside of it. So I couldn't get over that. And if this would never reach Travis Kelce, but if it ever did, he's got to do some soul searching on this one. Because I mean, like you just sold your soul, buddy. I mean that's
really
like
did.
if it
He
results
really
in one death of a boy that says, "Hey, I got a commercial here, and now I'm promoting this for Pfizer." And let's not talk about Pfizer. Like we have a standing order in our office not to buy a certain set of pharmaceutical companies. You know the number 1 pharmaceutical company in the world for the largest fines ever in history is Pfizer.
Pfizer, probably.
Pfizer. Like we will not invest in Pfizer.
Are they U.S. based?
Yeah, they're U.S. based.
Well, you never know. Some of those, there's a lot of companies that pharmaceuticals. I mean, they would have. That's a silly question because they couldn't get away with it. They're probably based in other countries, based upon what you just said a few minutes ago. Well, to kind of wrap the COVID thing up and how I looked at it as a councilman, there was just so many questions. And there was so much more evidence that came out probably after the first year of all this nonsense that just opened up the door, so to speak, of the corruption that we're talking about right now. But as it initially hit our country, I'm going, this is killing people that are dying up there, and so I had to really, to be honest, I had to trust some people as far as. Well, first of all, we have a great health department, but that's separate and apart from shutdowns. I thought we did as far as administering and having a vaccine available to anybody that wants it. I think they did a really good job.
I do too. I think that having the access to the vaccine was great. I told my dad, he died from it. I told him to go get the vaccine. I
Sure.
To certain degrees, I think and it's coming out now that ivermectin is now an approved drug.
Exactly.
And I think if he would have had, because the first 4 weeks he was sick bad. And he walked into my office. I was like, Dad, and he said, they can't do anything for me. They told me that there's nothing to do. And I said,
it's traditional doctors.
yeah. And I was like, I go, Dad, get on ivermectin. I don't care. I was like, the drug's been around for 100 years. Like it's got, and I don't care if it's a horse pill or not, get on ivermectin.
That's what I thought it was, the horse pill. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, it does not, the things that, and it all comes down to money. Ivermectin costs pennies. pennies.
Show me the
right?
money.
So what was the downside? I haven't heard of one person ever having an adverse reaction to taking it.
Really?
So you know what I'm saying? And I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to propose I'm a doctor, right? But I'm saying, what was the downside to even taking it?
A power.
Power,
and influence,
right?
and money,
But all the countries that said, "Hey, go take it," they actually had a better response to COVID. What it is?
Well, we understand what big pharma is all about.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter who it is. But the other thing, and I know we will wrap up, but I do want to address the sanctuary city for the unborn, because I knew when I cast my vote that I probably wouldn't be reelected, because if you remember right, it came to council and everything, the research that I did, that I was always an advocate. I never thought it should be a municipal issue. I'm the first person to tell you that I'm pro-life. But there's also some things that people understand about when you take an oath of office. There's some certain responsibilities that you serve everybody. So I look at a lot of people. I mean, there are people that still don't talk to me because of that vote. But I took a vote based upon the idea that it was, at that point in time, it was unconstitutional based upon Roe v. Wade. If we want to do that as a community, that's fine, but there's got to be a process to get there. Because I looked somebody right in the eyes. They were vicious, and I said, I want to ask you one question. Do you think that there are people that live in District 5 that are pro-choice?
I'm sure there is.
Why shouldn't they get a voice in whether we do the sanctuary city for the unborn? So I believe that the process worked out the way it should have, and that it went to the ballot box, and that we became a sanctuary city. But those people that are pro-choice, they at least got a chance to have a voice, and that to me is democracy.
I agree with you inside of there. And tell me what district you're in.
5, this one right here.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought you were in this. And so I always looked at it like, and this is one of those things where I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just think there's a moral one. And so from my perspective, the moral answer is I'm always in the side towards life. And,
Right.
and as soon as you start playing God, I think you're going down a path. And we've had our the biggest heated debates I've ever had with my team, and we're all friends. We're really close friends here, and so you can't ever, and I think the common denominator everybody is trying to struggle with on this is like, when do you decide life is?
Right.
Is it at inception, right? Is it while it's in the womb, right? Is it after? And I go, that's not for our decision.
It's not.
It's not. And so my deal is I'm always going to vote for never, ever, ever having it. I think it's like anything else. You always have to have some type of spectrum to limitations of that. And so, and everybody always points to the 1% of 1% of rapes and incest and health to the mother and all these other things. That's where I think you need to have some type of oversight to saying that there is reasons. Medical conditions, and medical conditions means psychological and physical and mental conditions. And so when you look at it from that standpoint on a rape or incest or things like that, and health to a mother, that's a medical issue that I think supersedes what the political issue is. And so that's when it comes down to the person and the doctor. But the problem is everybody keeps saying that the people that are largely having the abortions are the poorest or poor. They're not the ones that can weather it. And so when you look at it from that, and they're also minorities from what I understand. And these facts is what I've read. I don't know if they're 100% true, right? And so if you're looking at it from that aspect of it, I think it's more and well served to look at it like, how can we help people, educate people, do better as a society, but give people an opportunity and a chance, right? And so if you ever look at it from a standpoint like, what I don't agree with wholeheartedly is that it's the mother's sole decision. I think that comes back to just because she carries it, it's his decision too.
I agree. You're exactly right.
It takes two to tango.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, and that's where it's gotten down. And this is where I've read articles about, and I've counseled clients that's gone through divorces, and the legal system is 90% then a sway to the mom.
To the mother.
To the mother,
Of
right?
course it is.
But statistically now it's been proven that by doing that, children end up in drugs and they end up in prison instead of going to the male.
Yeah.
And so you have like a 4 times or 6 times, I can't remember the statistic is children deserve men in their lives. And when you overweigh it to the mom, it's wrong. And so it needs to be on a case-by-case basis and needs to be evaluated on each case on merit alone, not because of sex of this is a mom and this is a dad. That should not be, it almost needs to be a blind study kind of structure.
Well,
who's got the better?
One of the things that I experienced when I was counsel and all this was coming about, I had an older gentleman that had moved to Lubbock, and is kind of one of those online romances. He was in his 70s, but he moved to Lubbock to marry a lady that he met online. He was a very, very had a great career in law, and he even pled some cases at the Supreme Court.
Oh, well, he's a lawyer?
Yeah, as a lawyer.
Okay.
And I thought we were going through this, and he says, I really believe that at some point in time we will go back to the original provisions of Roe v. Wade, which were basically, I think, 3 or 4: rape, incest, health of the mother, that sort of thing. If we could dial that back to what it was, and you saw the progression of different cases that involved Roe v. Wade, it became what it really became is nothing but
genocide to me.
Abortion on will.
Yeah,
at will.
That's all it was. It's genocide, right?
Yeah.
Up to birth. I mean, that's and they just. There's multiple studies, but it's like 70-80% of Americans do not believe that you should have an abortion up to birth, and that's where California got really involved in stuff like this. And this has really got outside of finance, but I'm really good on pursuing alpha as like turning into like, let's have a conversation about finance and about society
Exactly.
inside of theirs.
But he said that, and it made a lot of sense because when he said that, I went back and did a study of the progression. I forgot what there was like 2 other cases or 3 other cases after the original Roe v. that it just got way out of hand. It became abortion on demand.
If it's inconvenient, who cares? I can do it.
Civil.
Yeah.
But I think it's also something you mentioned that it's how many you hear about these terrible abortion clinics in minority communities, and was that much more calculated than we realize? But my point is that that's how I would answer that. I truly believe that it worked. Our sanctuary city deal worked out the way I think it should have. Is that it did go to the ballot box. Everybody got a say, and I'm all for the fact that we voted for it, that we voted to be. But look where it is today. You can go back and look at some of the quotes that I said. That I truly believe it should have never been a municipal issue. It should be on the steps of the state capitol or at the steps of the Supreme Court. And look what happened. And that happened about a year and a half after we took the vote here. And that's where it should have been played out to begin with.
I agree with you on that. So I'm going to switch gears, and we're going to end this but we could keep going for a long time.
Yeah, we could.
Right. And so since we're in such sensitive conversations here, which I really appreciate actually having a conversation with people instead of screaming at them, you know what I'm saying? Because we get to see a different perspective, but understanding your perspective of being a councilman and actually going through that process is very valuable to me, and I appreciate you doing this, Randy. Yeah. The second one that I've also saying is we have to address guns. We have to do something on this. I am the biggest pro-gun guy you will ever believe, but I believe that our society has gotten stupider on guns than it is better. Right. Yeah. I remember growing up with a shotgun in my windshield of my pickup truck Yeah, right. Going to school, doing all these things, and it was not even thought of.
Didn't think, yeah.
Nothing inside of it.
I can at Tascosa High School in Amarillo, and
yeah,
that's a different place than that you probably went to high school.
yeah, I mean, I went to Highland Park, you know what I'm saying, in Amarillo.
Yeah.
So, and then I went to Shallow Water, and then Lubbock Christian, and right, and so there's all these things with it. But I am such a huge advocate of gun for gun safety and guns for gun rights, but it has to be some type of middle ground here. And what I think the middle ground is, what everybody is not addressing is education. It always comes down to education. And so I believe everybody should own a gun. And there shows so many countries that they just pour billions of dollars into everything in the world. Why can't we pour a couple $100 million or a couple million into just doing gun education, right? I think it would help. It's not saying that you can restrict guns. I'm not saying that you can limit guns. I'm not even touching those subjects, but we have to start educating. And I'm talking about our youth. I'm really talking about mental illness that comes down here, right? On saying it's how to handle a gun, how to work with guns, and just do it from an education standpoint. And I think that would alleviate a lot of the problems that we have and really come into, I think a lot of the problems are going to come back to, but we're never going to fix this anymore. It comes back to family values.
Absolutely.
And coming back to
You don't solve problems with a gun or a knife.
Yeah. Or it just
Or a
comes.
fist.
Yeah. It comes back to, I actually think you do sometimes. You do come back saying we should sometimes just be able to freely just fight somebody.
Well, I agree. I would agree with that. That would be a good alternative to a gun or a knife. Just let's get in that square circle and figure it out.
Yeah, and that's what they did back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and just have a nice, hey, buddy, me and you disagree. Let's just go duke it out and have guns with it.
Behind the school.
Yeah, behind the school, and all of that is being shunned. Like there was a kid that, took some, I think it was some whip rock thing in California, and he was like a bird on a perch, and he threw it. Joe Rogan was talking about this. He killed the bird, knocked him off the perch, and he was just ridiculed in society for doing that. But if we'd rewind 50 years ago, you would have been praised because you could kill something. Great shot. You could have ate it. You know what I'm saying? And so we're just gotten so far away from what we are as.
Well, we devalue the value of life.
Yeah, we've devalued the value of life, but we've also devalued the simple fact that we're placed on this earth to defend ourselves. We're placed on this earth to make sure that there is a rule of law. We're placed on this earth to hunt and to fish and to do all these things to actually enjoy the society that we live in and the earth that we live on. And we just
10 Commandments.
Yeah, it's going back to a lot of that.
Because and we'll finish with this because at the bottom of all my emails, I have Luke 6:31.
Say it. What is it?
The golden rule.
The golden rule.
Do unto others as you would have them do it. If you could figure that out, and when we really practice that on an individual and a community and in a global basis, and you really believe that, you try to live it, I think things would be a lot different.
I do. I don't know how to fix it. I don't think I have all the answers here. I think there's a lot smarter people in the world than me. But I appreciate your time here and definitely enjoyed our conversation as we've turned so many turns inside of what we've done from finance to
I don't think we
politics.
got into real slippery slopes. We might have, but it was good, a good conversation, and I think we need to talk more.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate you, Randy.
All right. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, buddy.